What it was a tow truck driver coming to repossess my car for the second time in 8 months.
Oh, man.
I go back in my room, I sit on the edge of my bed, and I've got my head in my hands, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, it's been about 5 years at this point. I've given it a good run. I'm struggling to make $20,000 a year. I can't keep up with bills. I think I'm gonna call it quits. And it's in that moment that I'm sitting on the edge of my bed that I get a call from Keisha Kayor. And she says, Jude, you won't believe it, you won't believe it. I was like, what happened, Keisha? She's like, I just got off the phone with my accountant and we just crossed over the 7-figure mark. I'm struggling to make $20,000 a year. Here's a client telling me in 1 year, she's made $1 million. And there were 2 ways that I could have looked at that. One, here's proof. I don't know what I'm doing and I need to call it quits because this client made $1 million in 1 year. I'm struggling to make $20,000 in 5 years. Or here's proof that I've created value for a client. Maybe I just need to go back and learn marketing and sales.
Hey friends, welcome back to Through the Dip, the show about what it's really like to be an entrepreneur and the hard-won lessons learned while navigating a business through the dip. Today, I'm in Chicago, Illinois, which is actually my home state where I was born. So it's fun to be back. I lived about 2.5 hours south of where we are now. But we're here with Jude, who actually isn't from Chicago at all. But maybe before we dive into my first question I have, like, where are we? Why are we in this beautiful, gorgeous house?
Yeah, so we are in Chicago. We are filming inside of one of my clients' homes. Her name is Jen Davidson. Jen Davidson is an interior designer who I've been working with since last year, helping her tell her story and continue to grow her brand and business. She was a flight attendant for 20 years and then decided to step out on faith and jump into creating her own interior design business. And now 5 years later, running a very successful business. And so we're sitting in her home. I'm here filming with her and her team this week, filming a second docuseries. We filmed one already. Now we're in the process of filming a second one. And yeah, it's pretty exciting and having fun doing it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It makes me a little nervous doing a podcast, filming with someone that does filming as a profession and for a living.
Yeah.
But something that we talked about previously a little bit, you mentioned something that just like has really stuck with me since we talked last, is you said that you are not the same person that you were 3 years ago. And a lot of that has to do with your business.
Yeah.
Maybe start with like who you are now and what you're doing now. And then I would love to kind of dive back and learn who you were and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, so I create documentaries for entrepreneurs. That is my niche. That's what I've been doing the last 19 years. But 2 years ago, I made a pivot. And I made a pivot into the design industry. That's why we're sitting in the home of an interior designer, where I would work with interior designers, builders, architects. But the first 6 months of going all in on this industry was not as easy as I thought it was going to be. So in 2001, I think it was, I started working with a woman by the name of Luann Nigera. She runs a podcast as well for interior designers. It's called A Well-Designed Business. And we did a docuseries, 4-part docuseries. It was amazing. She did a big launch for it online. People came and watched. But throughout filming it, I kept getting interior designers asking me, hey, how can I work with you? How can I work with you? Now, I work on these high-level big projects for entrepreneurs who are looking to expand their brand. They're already doing amazing things, but they're looking to expand their brand. And it's not as accessible to everyone because I only work with 5 clients a year at the time. Well, I saw an opportunity. I was like, hey, people keep asking me, let me create something that's a more feasible offer, accessible, that interior designers can invest in. Well, Stephen, I reached out to 100 interior designers from July 2023 to November 2023. And in their own way, each one of them said no. And so it challenged me because I was like, at that point, I think I was in business 16, 17 years. And I know marketing and sales. I know like when there's an opportunity, leverage points that I can hit on. But this one shocked me. And so, but as I sit here with you today, though, I am working on my 10th design-related project. And it took me understanding who I was and on a deeper level, but it also took me showing up unapologetically. Mm-hmm. So when I say that I'm not that same person that I was 3 years ago, I think there was a part of me that was still hiding. There was still a part of me holding back. And in going this route, I thought it was because, this is an easy business strategy. It'll help me expand my business. It ended up being I needed to do more work on me to be able to continue to grow this business on a level that I'm truly called for, not the level I was trying to hide from.
What were you hiding? Like when you say you're hiding, because like I think when I think about this podcast, there's these moments where I'm like I'm trying to do something that I'm not, but it's hard for me to identify like what exactly that is.
Yeah.
And like the more true I am to myself, I think the better the podcast works. But like, were you able to figure out like what that part of you was?
I think there's two parts. So I'm very passionate about leadership, self-leadership specifically. So what that means is if you're going to lead a team, you have to first lead yourself. What does that look like? How do you push yourself out of your comfort zone? How do you get to a point like I got to where 6 months in of going all in, this thing is not working? How do I do the deeper work to figure out why is this not working? Because this is not a marketing and sales problem, right? And so there's that one part, but then the other part is that I'm a Christian and I'm a strong believer in Jesus Christ. And I didn't always bring that to the work that I was doing with my clients. And I don't mean that, we're doing a docuseries and I'm opening up my Bible or anything like that, but it just means talking about my faith. It means even sharing so those 6 months when everyone said no, I went to an event called Luann Live. So same client, Luann Iyer, she throws an event called Luann Live. Those 100 people that said no, many of them were at Luann Live. And I began to see their faces, and I remember feeling this wave of rejection because I'm like, wait, that person said no, and that person said no, and that person. And it's easy to get a no through Zoom or through a phone call, but then you got to face that person. And I was speaking at that event. I had a 30-minute, I think it was a 30-minute or hour-long panel that I was speaking on. And I didn't want to do it because I'm looking at all these people that told me no, and I'm like, why would I show up? Like, these people have already rejected me. Why would I show up and do this talk? Well, I went back up to my hotel room, and part of what I did to get myself out of this place of I'm not going to do this is that I went and opened up my confidence bank. And then the confidence bank is an album that I have in my phone where it's testimonials or videos of people that have said good things about me. Just reminding myself, like, you've done this before. People do see value in what
Like
you
an archive that you just
An archive.
store
Yep.
these things that like say you're good at
Yep.
what you do.
Yep.
How often do you go back there to the
Oh,
archive?
that's weekly probably. I mean, it depends on like what I'm working on. It depends on how I'm feeling, especially if I'm feeling imposter syndrome or I just might have messed something up and I'm like, dang, how do I come back from this? So weekly, if not weekly, every other week for sure, I'm revisiting and looking at that. But the other thing that I did to get myself in a space to be ready to talk is that I prayed. I just simply prayed like, God, I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know what this is. I've never felt this before. I need to be able to continue to move forward and continue to give this talk because I'm not just showing up to give a talk. I'm showing up for the person that needs it most. My purpose is to lead and empower entrepreneurs to have relentless courage. And so I was praying that God would give me courage and to show that next person what it takes to be able to do this. Now, when you ask me what was I holding back, Jude 2-3 years ago wouldn't have shared that on a podcast. Whereas today I look at that and I'm like, that makes me who I am though. If you're looking at how do we build a relationship, how do you get to learn who people are, you need to learn every part of it, the good, bad, and ugly, but also the parts you may not agree with either. Part of me not sharing my faith is just because I didn't want to ruffle any feathers. I didn't want to make it seem like I'm holier than thou, I'm better than this person because I'm a Christian. When it's not that. Sometimes there are other Christians out there who are like, how do I do entrepreneurship and be a Christian at the same time?
Yeah.
Right. And so those are kind of the things that I was just holding back is how do I show up as me and not worry about what the next person thinks about who I am? Like as a man too, like the other thing is that I feel my emotions a lot more than most. And sometimes I'll end up crying. But being unapologetic about talking about it and knowing like I'm still a man at the end. Like that doesn't make me any less than, any weaker. Those type of things are the things that I was holding back that I looked at it as like there was this piece that I was hiding or trying to make it seem like I was this other person, but people didn't really get to know who I was. And I learned that in showing up fully, especially in making this pivot, that is what designers and architects and builders needed most. Not just, oh, he can tell a great story or that he was a great human being, but like there's these other pieces that they connected with most that really is the reason why they started working with me.
Yeah. I want to understand that pivot a little bit more, like how you started to start like getting into your design space and getting those 100 no's before you started getting those yeses. Like you've always been in the production space,
Yeah.
right? And always been kind of a storyteller. Like where did you start? And kind of take me up to where you realized that you had to make a change.
In 2006, I sat in a TV production classroom. I was 17 years old in high school. And I had a teacher, Mrs. Donnelly, who taught me everything she knew about video production. And then at the end of that junior year in high school, she looked at me. She was like, Jude, you're really talented at video production. You should start a business.
Did
Then,
you know you were talented? Would you look at other kids and be like, yeah, I'm doing better?
no, no. And I didn't know why Mrs. Donnelly had taken a liking to me to teach me these things. But there was something she saw in me. But I didn't know anything about being an entrepreneur, starting a business. I'm the youngest of 10 children. My mom worked at a chair factory. My dad was a construction worker. None of my siblings were entrepreneurs. But Mrs. Dolly didn't take no for an answer. She came into the classroom the next day and she handed me a yellow envelope. I was like, what is this? She's like, look inside. And when I looked inside, Stephen, of this yellow envelope, it was my very first set of business cards.
So she went out and printed you business cards. What were on it? Like, how'd she get your email and phone number, or
Well,
what was it?
because we had kind of been talking about it, the business name, I can't remember how we came up with it, but the business name was Video Precision by Charles. I don't remember how we came up with it. But she already had my number and had my email. And she went and printed it, and it was for her, it was like, no, you can do this. All you needed was business cards to get started. Now, of course, I was naive enough to think that, because immediately I hit the ground running and just started telling people, hey, I do video production. Do you need any video work? I started with small things, church events, small weddings. Like I was charging $500 for a wedding. It was crazy. And then over time, I worked with this entrepreneur. Her name is Keisha Dior. She goes by Keisha Kayor now. That's when I did the first documentary. That was about 4 years in, 2010. So I started in 2006, May 5th, 2006. By 2010, I started working with Keisha. And Keisha had launched this business, cosmetic business, called Kayor Cosmetics. And we had filmed the behind the scenes of her building this business from the ground up. So she launches this documentary. In the first year, she makes $1 million.
Wow.
And I'll never forget the day she called me to tell me that.
Because of the documentary?
Because of the documentary. It played a role in it. She called me one day. I had just woken up that morning to the sounds of chains hitting the floor. And it had always been a nightmare for me to hear these chains hitting the floor. When I jumped up out of bed, I walked out the front window. I looked out the front window, and what it was a tow truck driver coming to repossess my car for the second time in 8 months.
Oh, man.
I go back in my room. I sit on the edge of my bed, and I've got my head in my hands, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, it's been about 5 years at this point. I've given it a good run. I'm struggling to make $20,000 a year. I can't keep up with bills. I think I'm going to call it quits. And it's in that moment that I'm sitting on the edge of my bed that I get a call from Keisha Kayor. And she says, Jude, you won't believe it. You won't believe it. I was like, what happened, Keisha? She's like, I just got off the phone with my accountant, and we just crossed over the 7-figure mark. I'm struggling to make $20,000 a year. Here's a client telling me in 1 year, she's made $1 million. And there were two ways that I could have looked at that. One, here's proof. I don't know what I'm doing, and I need to call it quits, because this client made $1 million in 1 year. I'm struggling to make $20,000 in 5 years. Or here's proof that I've created value for a client. Maybe I just need to go back and learn marketing and sales.
Well, what would you feel though when she said, I made this $1 million and your car's being repossessed? Like, you're like, well, where's my cut of that? Like, I mean, I don't know what you charged her for it, but if you're doing weddings for $500, it probably wasn't.
I only charged her. We filmed for 6 months, and I only charged her $3,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did that make you frustrated and mad?
Very frustrated. It didn't make me think, where's my cut? Ironically, it didn't make me think that. But it made me frustrated. Like, why can't I get this right?
Yeah.
She's gotten it right. And so I started to look at what was the difference between me and her. And there was virtually no difference other than Keisha woke up every morning, and I got to document it. I got to see it. She would wake up every morning, and the first thing she did is grabbed her phone to go on Twitter. She only used Twitter at the time to grow her business. And she would go on her phone and start telling people, hey, this is the new product I'm working on. What do you think of it? She was doing, and I didn't know it at the time, but she was doing market research. She would put out a color, and she was like, what do you guys think of this color? Would you buy it? Right? And if there was good responses, she would make it. If there wasn't, she would toss it and do another color. And so I went back and learned marketing and sales and began to really understand What is the value that I'm creating, and how do I communicate that value to a client so that they will want to pay me more than just $3,000, right? It took time to understand what business really is. I went into it like most creatives. All I got to do is be talented at the work that I do, and clients will come. It's not the case. You still have to learn how to communicate. You still have to learn what is it that's important to that other person. And it was no different than years later when I went after those 100 designers. I was just pitching them the wrong thing. Even though they had heard of me, even though they had probably even heard me on podcasts, it wasn't what they wanted from me at the time. And I had to learn how to go back and like, oh, okay, this is not what they wanted, but here's how I can package it in a way to make it something that they want.
Yeah. What did you have to learn? Because like when I hear you talking, like you're telling other people's stories and you're telling them incredibly well, and it's resonating with their audience.
Yep.
And so it seems like you should be able to just turn around and just tell your own story.
No, I wasn't. Believe it or not, that story about Mrs. Donnelly giving me the business cards, I wasn't telling that story because I was like, big deal. Like, why would anyone care that a teacher gave me business cards, and that's how I got started? But when I started sharing that story, I would notice people would lean in, or they would ask me more questions as to, wait, she gave you business cards? Why did she give you business cards? Even how you asked the question of like, did you even think you were talented back then? I really didn't. I just knew how to pick up a camera, and that's it. It wasn't, I was hiding even back then from my own stories and the things that I was just like, no one would care about that. I was playing small. But that was like one of the things I needed to learn. The other is asking really good questions to understand what is it that's important to that client.
Yeah, there's something I think different about trying to tell your own story versus trying to tell someone else's story. Because like when I'm not doing podcast stuff, I'm run a marketing agency, and it's way easier for me to sell somebody else's company than to sell my own, because there's something about like in your own head, and you get confused with the story that you've told yourself for years and the story that you need to tell.
Yeah.
And trying to like understand the difference between those two things is really challenging sometimes. Whereas you can look at somebody else and say like, oh, I see this story and I see the beauty and I see how amazing this is.
Yeah.
And you can almost tell someone else's story because I don't know, do you think there's like some sort of like, I don't know if it's shame or modesty or something that just like keeps you from like telling your own in a like what is that barrier there?
I think there's two things. So I think it's you can't read the label from inside the jar. Right? And it's hard for us to see the value that we bring just as human beings, not even in business, just as human beings. It's hard sometimes. We're our worst critic. But the other thing I think a lot about it too is how I grew up. I am the child of Haitian immigrant parents, and we were taught to be modest. We were taught to not brag about yourself and not tell people, even if you've done something great and that you're really proud of, you shouldn't go out there and boast about it. And I think that bled into the business as well. Is like, if I'm talking about myself and I'm talking about maybe this great story that I've told, even sitting here and I'm telling you, yeah, we're working on a second docuseries with this client, which means the first one was successful. So now she's coming back to do a second one. At a young age, I was taught that could be too braggadocious. That could be thinking too highly of yourself, which is why to me that confidence folder is so important.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we joked about this before we came on that, I've probably done more podcasts than you. Even though I don't have the podcast, I have been a guest on podcasts. But I'll tell you why I keep doing them. As we record this, it's we're in 2025, but November 2024, I got an email, ironically, in Chicago. I was here filming the docuseries with Jen in Chicago, and it was the last day, and I got this email, and when I opened it, I realized it was a very long email. I'm like, do I want to read this? But I read the first line. It was the first line that got me. And it said, my dad died a week after walking me down the aisle. I was like, okay, where is this going? Because it's a very strong line to start with.
Yeah, and from someone that you don't know?
No, I know she was on my email list, but I hadn't really talked to her. This was the first email I think that I was getting from her. And so I started reading it. And she tells me how her uncle recently died. Her dad had died in 2010. Her uncle recently died, which was her dad's brother. And her dad's brother, when he passes away, she feels like she's losing this connection she had to her dad. Her dad had helped her build a business. She lives in Canada and runs a drapery business. And her dad had helped her take over the business from her mom. Her mom started it, and she was building it up. And they were having these meetings once a week, all the way up until probably about a month before he passed away. And the last month before he passed away, he used to wear this hat called it said "Life is Good" on the hat. And so she's trying to figure out how can she have this connection with her dad again. She's feeling lost, feeling sad. She decides to go on the podcast app on her phone. She's on a drive to go visit one of her projects, and she pulls up the podcast app, and she looks up my name. Now, Steven, I just told you I don't have a podcast.
Yeah.
But she's just trying to find, okay, what's another podcast he's been a guest on that I could listen to? She decides to pull up a podcast called How to Sell on Etsy or something like that, How to Grow Your Etsy Business, which has nothing to do with her business. And is one of the ones I had done at the time that she went to go listen. It's one of the most recent ones I had done. Hour-long podcast. I listens to the whole thing. But in the last 2 minutes, the podcast host asks me, what books are you reading right now? So I tell her 2 books. And she's like, well, I want to give you a book. I think you're really going to enjoy this book. After this conversation, I've learned a lot about you. I think there's this one book that you're really going to enjoy. The name of the book is Life is Good. Life is Good is a brand. It was the same hat that this woman's father was wearing. And it was in the last 2 minutes that this comes up. And she says in the email, it's what she needed to feel like she can connect with her dad again. It gave her hope.
Wow.
I told you in the beginning that my purpose is to lead and empower entrepreneurs to have relentless courage. One thing I've learned in the last, let's say, 3 to 5 years, by doing so many podcasts, I've done over 150 podcasts now. One thing I've learned is not just to lead and empower entrepreneurs to have relentless courage, is to do it with my voice, right? And so, like, when you ask me, what is it that I needed to learn? What is it that made the shift? How do I go from, okay, I tell all these other people's great story. How do I tell my own story? Why do I keep showing up? It's because I'm paying attention to what other people are saying from what's the value they're really getting. I tell great stories. That's amazing. But the value that they're really getting, for some reason, is through the stories that I share, through the experiences of my life that I share with my voice. And that is what has helped me learn to just keep showing up. Even though it might feel a little uncomfortable, even if you're unsure that this thing is going to help someone, you have so many people that have already told you. Last year in 2024, I had 16 different messages of people telling me your voice impacted me in some way, some form. I just paid attention to that and continued showing up in that way. And that's how I've really made this big shift of I'm going to share who I am unapologetically, because it may not resonate with all, but they're the few that I'm called to that is going to resonate with. And that's what's kind of helped me tell the story, because I wouldn't know that unless I paid attention to what other people were saying and the value that they were getting. I couldn't read my own label because I'm inside. I'm trying to figure out, how do I make this thing work? They've already told me what's valuable to them. Keep doing that. The video storytelling is just the icing on the cake. But if I continue to show up the way that they've told me they want me to show up, that's what matters.
How did you get to the point where you decided to start showing up unapologetically? Like, was it a light bulb moment? You're like, I'm going to start showing up unapologetically? Or is it something that just like kind of, you also realize that Jude is showing up unapologetically?
The email I just told you about was part of it. Because one thing I didn't tell you is that I cried reading that email. Because I couldn't imagine, this is a woman's, let's just say her darkest moment. Losing her dad that she had lost in 2010, but now losing her uncle, who she felt like was the connection to her dad. And she feels lost. In some way, somehow, my voice is the one that gives her hope again. When I read that email, I remember thinking to myself, I can continue to hide. I can continue to think small of myself. I can continue to say, for lack of better terms, that I don't matter. Like, I have sat back and thought about what happens if Jude Charles is no longer here. And in thinking about that, I can continue to make excuses and say that I'm not that important, all these things. Or I can realize there are people out there that are literally, if I don't show up, they will continue to feel lost.
Do you feel like there's a part of you that's feels so strongly about that, because like you're reaching back to the
Mhm.
person who is sitting on that bed with the car just repossessed, trying to figure out, where to go next and what to do. Do you shut it down or do you keep going?
Yeah, yeah. I think I've always been looking for purpose. If this has happened, and as a result of this happening, then this happened, I've always been trying to connect the dots. 2014, I went to a leadership conference, and it was in Spokane, Washington. Leadership has always been important to me. I was 25 years old at the time, and I was just trying to figure out the meaning of life. I'm in my 20s, like, still going through figuring things out.
What do you mean by leadership has always been important to you? You've said that a couple of times. What does that mean?
That means that I've understood that I was different. I understood that, like, when I was growing up, friends would come to me for advice, and I was in middle school, high school. It was like, why are they coming to me for advice? I knew that I thought different. And in thinking different, I knew that I would be called to, and I didn't know it was what leadership meant yet, but I knew I would be called to um, help a group of people go along a journey. So when I always thought of leadership, I always thought of like the pastor of a church, the president, CEO of a business. And I never wanted that. I never wanted to be the center of attention. But I knew like the qualities that I held, it was different because people kept looking to me for answers. So going to this leadership conference, I'm trying to figure out what is it? What is leadership? How do I do that? What does that look like? First time ever going to a leadership conference. I had been to conferences before, but never specifically leadership. And when you go to a conference, right, you coming from the conference, you have, let's say, 3 or 4 days, you have this notebook full of notes. You're excited, you're amped up, but then you get back to life, that notebook goes in a corner. And I remember thinking, I don't want to do that this time around. If I know leadership is important, I'm trying to get the answer to why I'm going to do leadership and why I'm going to lean into it. I need to digest this. I decided to do a 3-day trip back home. So Seattle, Spokane, Washington is the furthest northwest point of America, Washington State. I live in Florida, furthest southeast point. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a Greyhound bus back home. It's 3 long days. It'll give me time to digest. Yeah, it was the dumbest idea I've ever done that.
That's intense.
It's the dumbest idea. I was miserable by day 2. And ironically, I get to Chicago, Illinois on day 2. And I turn back on my phone. I had my phone off the whole time. I turn back on my phone. And I get a flood of text messages, but there's one that stands out, and it's from my sister, and it says, "Call me back, it's urgent." Now, I brace myself because in 2014, in March, my dad had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. Also in that year, my mom had attempted suicide. She was suffering from depression. And so when I get this text message from my sister and says, "Call me back, it's urgent," I know it's either mom or dad. And so I call my sister. She says, they found my dad unresponsive in the home. And I'm like, okay, I know what that means. They won't tell me because I'm on the road, but that means he's passed away. So I get on the first flight back home, and my brother comes to pick me up. He comes with his daughter, my niece, Ayana. And I hug my brother. I don't say a word. I hug my niece. I don't say a word. But I sit in the back seat with my niece. I'm 25 years old, youngest of 10 children, and I feel lost because I never imagined I would lose my dad at such a young age.
Yeah.
And Ayana, who's 9 years old at the time, she looks at me. She says, "Uncle, why did Grandpa have to die?"
Wow.
Why did Grandpa have to die? And that question rang in my ear. I didn't answer because I don't know how to answer a 9-year-old. It was the first time ever dealing with death. But that question continued to ring in my ear as we're making funeral arrangements, as we're trying to figure out what to do next. And my family leaned on me through that moment. And not only leaned on me, but asked me, the youngest, to give my father's eulogy. Now, I could look at that moment like, okay, that was random. Here I am coming from this leadership conference. I lose my dad, and then here's my family leaning on me, asking me to tell my dad's story, ultimately, at his funeral.
Did you view that as like a privilege, or did you view that like your family was asking you to do this, or you're just like, why are you guys asking me to do this? Like,
Yeah, I viewed it as a privilege. I viewed it as there's something they saw in me that I didn't see in myself at the time. When you're the youngest of the family, you're trying, especially in a big family like that, you're trying to figure out where do you fit. There's all these other voices. There's all these other people older than you. The sibling before me is 6 years older than me.
Wow.
So it's like, where do I fit into this equation of a family?
Yeah.
But obviously they saw something that I didn't see. When you ask me, like, how did you know leadership was important? Or it seems like you're always looking for meaning. That moment that I gave my father's eulogy, I remember standing in the church looking out at the audience, and I remember thinking, this is not by accident. And it's the moment that I realized my purpose to lead and empower entrepreneurs to have relentless courage. Part of leadership that I realized was important is not just leading for the sake of leading, but to lead through difficult moments, the most challenging moments in life. Sometimes that's a pivot that you're making in business. Sometimes that is you just, in your mind, failed or do something right in business and you just need a little bit of encouragement. Or it's like the woman who lost her uncle, who was the connection to her dad, and she's just like, how do I move on? How do I deal with this? I'm always looking because I had always searched for how do I fit in this family. It also turned into how do I fit in life? And I think I looked at every moment that's continued to happen to me over time. It's like, okay, what does this mean though? Yes, it happened. Yes, I didn't make I struggled to make $20,000 a year. Yes, this client called me in this moment as I'm like getting my car repossessed. But what does it mean? I could continue to complain and look at it as a negative thing, and it sucks. It feels horrible. I was never ignoring my feelings. But I was like, okay, what now, though? Because at some point, you do need to move on. At some point, you do need to grow from this. How are you going to do that? I've always been searching for that meaning. I continue to search for the meaning. I continue to connect the dots. But I think that is the point of life, is to find your purpose, find where you fit. And it doesn't mean I'm not searching to speak in front of thousands or change millions of lives, just the ones that I'm called to.
Yeah.
And to be intentional about that.
I feel like there's a lot of people, including myself, that struggle with like trying to find meaning. It's like what's the purpose of all of this? Or like even especially in the hard times, where things just do not look great. It's like why are we even doing what we're doing? Right.
Yeah.
How do you find that meaning? Can you help someone to find that meaning, or does someone have to like realize it themselves? Like, is through working through those hard things that you get to the meaning?
I was sitting with a interior designer in California when I was there a couple weeks ago or last week. And she has this line about her business that says, we create sanctuaries, which is unique. Okay, sanctuary. But I was like, what's your why though? Why does that matter to you? And we ended up going down this rabbit hole of like, she just never felt like she had a sanctuary. She is from Singapore, moved to United States. But even though in moving to the United States, it still kind of felt like I don't have a place where I can call home. And she was like, they were renting a house at first. And now her and her husband and young daughter, they now just have a two bedroom, two bathroom apartment. And she was like, it's the first time in my life I've ever felt like I've had a home.
Wow.
And she was like, when she was in college, she had kind of traveled to, I think it was Paris at one point and then London. And she was like, I was just in these small spaces, sharing it with other people. And she's had all these experiences in life. And she was just like, I want to help others have their sanctuary. And then she told me one of her clients recently, she worked on a project in 2022, I think it was, or 23, and built this beautiful home for a client where their house got burned down in the LA fires in the Palisades.
Yeah.
And she was like, they have money and all these things, but when you lose your home, you don't have a sanctuary. She starts to cry. And I said to her, if your why doesn't make you cry, you don't know why. We get this question of what is your why? We ask that question often. We ask about our purpose often, but we don't slow down to think deep enough about the thing that really moves you emotionally. Yes, hypothetically, you're an interior designer, you get to design homes, and that's where you get to show your creative juices. Yes, you're running a podcast and running an agency, and you get to really be creative, or in my case, help other people tell their story, and you really get to be creative. But how are you operating in your purpose? What is the thing that you bring that no one else can bring to a project? That's your purpose. That's your why. We just need to slow down long enough to connect those dots to say, this is why this is meaningful to me. I am grateful I get to run a business where I help people tell their story, but it's not the reason why I exist. That just happens to be the vehicle that I've chosen. I was 17 years old when I started my business. I had to have a lot of courage because my family didn't approve of me starting a business at 17. They didn't approve of Jude saying, I'm not going to go to college. This is not for me. They didn't approve of, they thought this whole thing was a hobby. And it took them 8 years before they ever said, Jude, can I see some of your work?
Wow.
For some people, that would slow them down to say, I'm not going to do this thing. My family doesn't support it. I can't do it without their support.
Yeah.
I chose to go a different path. But that took relentless courage. It took relentless courage to get 100 no's from interior designers and still say, no, I'm called to be right here in this spot. I'm going to continue to give it a try to where it's now working. It's now succeeding, right? You have to find that thing, and it doesn't happen overnight, but it happens when you slow down and you think and you connect the dots as to all these things happen in my life and they've led me to this. If those things didn't happen, I wouldn't be where I am today. Had I not decided to take a risk at 17 years old to start a business, I would not be sitting here with you today, Stephen, having this conversation and connecting the dots. Even in our conversation, connecting all the dots of like Chicago. Chicago is where I found out I lost my dad. Chicago was where I got that email from the client that it shifted me. Chicago is where I've been working with Jen Davidson, who has been one of my greatest clients that I've had in a very long time. Even that, not to say I want to move to Chicago or any of those things, but that's not by accident.
Yeah.
Right? It is a very big dichotomy to live in a place of purpose while also going through struggle and trying to figure out, what does this mean? It's hard for some people because some people don't ever slow down long enough to think, to just think.
How do you slow down? Because I look at your life and you're traveling all over. Like, you just filmed an entire day yesterday. You're taking time out of your day to do this podcast with me. Now you're going to go film in the afternoon again.
Yep.
And you came in from LA to here, and then you're not even heading home, you're heading somewhere else.
Yep.
Like that doesn't feel slow at all.
Yeah. You have to be intentional about it. So I find time to think on the plane. I love being on a plane because it's the one place that I am locked away in a tube with no internet, and it's just me. And yes, you can buy internet and all those things and connect to the internet. I choose not to. I choose to sit with my thoughts. I do it also when I'm on sabbatical. I take every June and December off. And in that time, I'm asking myself really hard questions to analyze what have the last 5 months looked like. Something new I started this year that I've really enjoyed is I have started to analyze every month now, where I write myself these memos of like what happened in the last 30 days to try to, for me, again, most things start as a business idea, but it turned into something that is better than business for me. I started doing that in business because I was just like, I need to see things faster. I love my sabbaticals because I can do I do the analysis and then I'm able to pivot. But I was like, what if I just not pivoted for the sake of pivoting every 30 days, but what if I noticed like there's these really great things happening and I do more of that, right? Every month. But what it's helped me do is reflect on like, what has happened? Why has it happened? Who am I becoming as it's happening? You have to be intentional about setting aside time, even if it's 30 minutes a day, to set aside time to truly just reflect on where are you right now and where do you want to go and what is helping you get there? Who is helping you get there? You got to ask yourself the really hard questions. And yes, life is full right now for me, but I don't ignore a lot. I'm constantly reflecting. I don't ignore a lot at all.
Who was helping you keep moving forward when you were only making 20,000 and your family sounds like they weren't super jazzed about what you were doing? I'm sure they had their thoughts and shared them. Like, who kept you moving forward?
Nobody but God, to be honest with you. I've always been a Christian. Like, I grew up in the church, but in my 20s, I really understood what it meant to be a Christian. And so when I started this business, which was 17, but then by the time I was struggling to make money, I was about 22 years old. And what I saw modeled to me through my mom specifically was that when hard times come, you lean on God more. Now, she had always leaned on God. She was a hardcore Christian. She was the Bible thumping Christian that would tell everybody that Jesus loves you and you need to get saved. But one thing I paid attention to was that when she was happy, she played music. When she was sad, she played music. And when I say music, I mean gospel music specifically, in that she just leaned on God 24/7. And so when I was struggling in business, that's what helped me. I didn't have the support of my family. I didn't have the support of my friends. Like, I have friends now that joke about it, but they're like, "We had no idea what you were doing in high school." Like, yes, we heard you say you're starting business and you're doing this video production thing, but we didn't know what that meant. All I had was me and God. And nowadays, yes, I have mentors and I have other people who help me, but I didn't have that. No one understood what I was doing. I had no friends that was doing what I was doing. I had no family that was doing what I was doing. Even though the teacher, Mrs. Donnelly, gave me support in the sense that she gave me business cards, but she had never ran a business either. Like, I just had me. That's it. And I did learn over time why I struggled is because I didn't have mentors. I have this pride issue that I needed to figure things out and prove to my family that I could do this. But the only reason I figured that out is because I leaned on God, where He could work certain things out and say, "Hey, that doesn't serve you. Like, yes, I want you to have drive. I want you to have hustle. I want you to work hard. But you don't need to prove this to anybody but yourself."
Yeah.
Right? And so I didn't have anyone. I think I just leaned on that relationship that I had with God, and I continued to try to deepen that. What does that mean? What does that look like? What does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean um, to live in joy, right? And to, even though you're having hard times, but to also be happy, to be content, all these things that are Christian, strong Christian beliefs. What does that mean? What does that look like? I had a friend ask me recently, uh, she was like, "How do you stay sane?" Like, how do you stay sane? How do you, because of life is full and because there's so many things going on, how do you stay sane? I'm in constant pursuit of what it means to have a deeper relationship with God. And that means that now, I started this last year, but every Monday, I block out 2 hours, despite my busy schedule, to have my own personal Bible study time. And that means I am reading the Bible and I'm trying to understand, based on where I am in life, what does this mean? How do I apply this? Even though the Bible was written thousands of years ago, but what does it mean today? How is it relevant today? That, I believe, not only helped me through this season where I was struggling to close interior designers, but even in the busy time where I'm forcing myself to slow down. I'm forcing myself to reflect. I'm forcing myself to um, not forget who ultimately created me and not forget that all the things that I have, the opportunities that I have came from God.
Connect the dots for me between like where you're barely making it by, you get this call, and then where you are now today. Because like, how did you how did you bridge that gap?
So I took a year off from pitching clients, taking on clients. I continued to work with Keisha Dior for a year, but I also took off a year.
Did you up your rates when you like?
With Keisha, no. With Keisha, no. But I went back and learned marketing sales. I took a course called Earn 1K. And the premise behind the course was that the premise was to earn $1,000. And if you earn $1,000, you can repeat it. Well, I had already earned $1,000, but I realized I hadn't earned it the right way. And so this guy, his name is Ramit Sethi, he taught how to earn $1,000 and like how to do market research and communicate value and all those things. And so the very first person I pitched after that was an interior designer. And he had saw me through another project that I had worked on with the city of Pompano Beach, that's where I live. They had celebrated 100 years. And they needed a documentary done. And so I had worked on that documentary for a year. And then he remembered me from that. And so he reached out and was like, he wants a slideshow. I used it as an opportunity to take all these things that I learned from the course to now pitch him on doing what I called at that time a brand series. I remember it took me a month to put the proposal together because I was overthinking. I was in my head about what it would take to put this together. But I remember I pitched him, and then at the end I said the number, and I was like, this is going to cost $15,000. So I went from charging $3,000 to $15,000, essentially doing the same thing I was doing with Keisha. And his next words shocked me. He was like, great, when do we get started?
Wow.
And so because of that Earn 1K course, I realized, okay, this worked. I started taking on more courses and I went to film workshops, but not film workshops to learn how to get better at filming, but to learn the business side of filmmaking. I just continued to grow from there. Now that first year, I think I made 50,000. And it just continued to grow from there to the point that I got to, I think about 2016, 15, 16, where I started charging for the first time ever, 6-figure projects. And so, but doing the exact same thing, doing documentaries or docuseries for entrepreneurs. But that all happened because I just continued to learn the business side. I focused a lot on the business side and not so much on the technical. I focused on how to tell stories, but not through filmmaking, not like, oh, let me get the better camera and the better equipment and all these things. I just focused on marketing, sales. How do I get better? How do I understand human psychology so that I understand why this person buys? Not just that they bought from me, not just that, they need help with storytelling, but what is the deeper thing that they are really searching for?
Yeah.
I've learned now many clients don't hire me for storytelling, for video, any of those things. A lot of my clients hire me because of the leadership part. Because I asked one of my clients, Luann Nigera, actually. So I asked this question at the beginning of road mapping. I tell the story of how I lost my dad and I figured out my why. But then I ended by saying, I've told you my why, but why did you decide to invest in yourself? Why did you decide that not only you would take this time out to sit with me for 3 to 6 hours, that's what road mapping takes, but like that this was the right time to do it, or that I was the right person to invest in. And Luann, I'll never forget, she told me how her husband, when she told her husband she was getting ready to work with me, she was like, Jude is coming in to do this documentary. And husband was like, why are we working with Jude? We have other video people we've used before. Why are you choosing Jude? She was like, I don't think you get it. Yeah, we have other video people, but they can't do what Jude does. I need someone to lead me through this process.
Yeah.
And so I started to, again, paying attention to what clients say, how they say it, that kind of thing. I realized clients weren't hiring me for storytelling or video. They're hiring me to lead them through the process. They're hiring me because of the leadership angle that I strongly understand, that I have conversations with them about on the side. Like while we're doing video production and we're doing all these other things, I'm having conversations about leadership.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Something that you said about the process, I think really stuck out to me because I was having a conversation with someone the other day about AI, especially like in marketing, because like it's just everything's AI these days. And this person was saying that they believe that the missing part that we're losing right now, because everyone's using AI to create ads or to create copy or to create images, is the time consuming process to get to it. He's like, what you learn in the process is more valuable than the outcome of what you produce. And you couldn't get to what you produce without that lesson, but like you have to learn the lesson. The only way to learn that lesson is to put in the time
Yep.
and the work. And so like what you were saying about like your clients, like investing financially, investing their time,
Yeah.
like to get to a place that's not easy to go. And you're not going to get there by just saying, what is my why, Chat GPT? Like it can help you think through it to some degree,
Yeah.
but it takes time and it takes soul searching and it takes somebody helping you oftentimes sit with those like deep, hard questions
Yeah.
to really start understanding yourself and who you are.
Yeah. I'm a fan of AI, but I agree with you that the process is the real valuable part of the journey.
Yeah.
Had I not gone through the process of those 100 no's, I wouldn't be where I am now, working with designers. Had I not, specifically in that process, just going through rejection and getting past that, I could, and I did go through ChatGPT in the sense that I would ask it, what do interior designers find more valuable? Or how should I pitch this? And all these things. But it wasn't that helped me as much as really understanding what I bring to this space, but that only happened because of the process. You can't avoid the process. You can't just think, oh, I'm going to create it to do these ads. I'm going to use AI to do these ads and it's going to be the thing that blows up my business. It will help you save time. It will help you, creatively come up with things. It should be an assistant.
Yeah. A part of the
A
process.
part of the process, but not the process.
Yes.
You can't avoid the process. You cannot avoid the process. I think that when we're thinking about business and we're thinking about how do I grow it, all these other things, your purpose determines the position that you take in business. And purpose is a part of a process. Connecting the dots is a part of a process, and you can't avoid it.
Why do you think legacy is important to you?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I don't know that I've ever been asked that before. My parents come from the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, Haiti. We didn't grow with much. Like, we weren't poor. I don't know what it means to not have food on the table or for the power to never be on or the electricity get cut or anything or water. I don't know what that is, but we also weren't extremely wealthy. But I do know who I am today is a big part of that is because of my parents and the grit and determination and perseverance that they had. The culture that they taught us about being Haitian and those things. I think some of the conversations that my parents had with me, it was never really about legacy as much as though, but like believing in who you are and the family that you come from. And I don't know, I just adopted over time that what matters most is not the money you leave behind because we didn't have it. We didn't have money.
Yeah.
But what you leave behind is the principles. The principles that I learned from my parents, even though we didn't have money, is what carries me today.
Yeah.
And I've just always paid attention to that. But legacy to me is that it's what am I leaving behind that if I believe this was my purpose to lead and empower entrepreneurs to have relentless courage, how do I continue that? How do I, once I pass away, like people like the Rockefellers and all these others, once they pass away, what carries on? It's not just the name, but it's the principles. It is the meaning of life that you help other people with.
If you could reach back and tell 17-year-old Jude something that would get him to where he needed to go without as much pain, like what did you learn that you wish you would have known before, I guess?
Get out of your own way. Get out of your own way. The only limitation that you have is the one that you create. And I had created so many limitations in the beginning of the business that held me back a lot longer than it needed to. Even today, like I am on a shoot I had before this in Virginia, I brought on a new producer that I hadn't worked with before. And I was very nervous about it because I was like, I don't know how my client's going to respond to this. But I was honest with the client. Hey, I'm bringing on a new producer. Haven't worked with him before. Your shoot will be the first shoot. And she embraced it. I could have set up the limitation to say, oh man, I can't bring on a new producer right now. I'm playing at too high of a level. My clients aren't going to accept this. But that's a story I would have made up in my own head. And so I think the only limitation you have is the one that you create. And that's what I would have told 17-year-old Jude is like, get out of your own way. You don't know everything. You don't have to know everything either. All you have to do is have faith and keep trying. Everything else, get help. Ask for help. It's okay. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you any less of a man. Get help. And I think that's a big part of it is just getting out of my own way. In May 2022, I was filming a project with my team in Delaware. And we were filming a docuseries with a client. This client was having a 4-day event, live event. And on day 2, I think it was, we walked into the lobby to film with the client. And they went on break during the event. Team of 4. When the interview was done, my team went back into the main event center. Me and the client, we stayed back and talked a little bit in the lobby. When I finally walked into the main event center, I looked at my head of production. His name is Jason. And Jason looks at me. He's got a dead serious look on his face. He's like, we just got robbed. Now, Jason could be a bit of a jokester. And so I'm waiting for him to laugh or he's just dead serious. What had happened is a person walked into the event center and stole 2 of our cameras, 8 of our lenses. We walked in with 4 cameras, 10 lenses. They came and robbed us of 2 cameras, 8 lenses, almost like more than half of our equipment.
You had more shooting to do.
And we had more shooting to do.
And that's so much money.
$20,000 worth of equipment. And now I have to process in my mind, is my team okay? How are we going to continue this shoot? What do I tell the client? Am I okay? Because in at that point, I think I was in business maybe 16 years, 17 years. I had never even lost a microphone, let alone cameras and lenses. And we ended up having to do a police report. We had to call the police, get the police to come out, look at the cameras. While the event is continuing, I went to my team and I was like, look, are you guys okay to continue? If you're not, I will go to bat for you guys and tell the client we're not continuing. So you don't have to continue. They said they were fine with continuing. We continued. The client came over after we did the police report and was like, hey, what has the police said? Jason was like, we did the police report. We still have equipment left. We're going to still be successful. I know why Jason did that, because he was trying to shield the client from what had happened. But I looked at, right after Jason said that, I looked at the client and I was like, Jason is trying to put lipstick on a pig. We are not going to be successful. We're going to continue with what we have left. But I want you to understand this is not going to be at the level that you're used to. Because at that point, I had been working with that client for 3 years. And we had done a docuseries already. She was used to my work and she loved it. But I was like, we don't have all our equipment now. And we even lost some footage. So I was like, we're not going to be as successful as you probably think. But we're still going to continue. That season of life was also a season where I was still suffering from depression and trying to recover. But what I learned in that moment is all the things that I needed, that I thought I needed, I didn't need anymore. The reason I burnt out is because I was still operating from this place of 20-year-old Jude who had started the business, whereas now I'm in my 30s. I can't operate the same way I operated in my 20s. But I had learned that I could still, like, the value that I brought was so much bigger than just production. It was in leadership. And the lesson that I learned is that no matter the circumstance, I can continue to be a leader. Meaning, even though I'm going through depression, even though we just got robbed, which is a very vulnerable, that leaves you, it's hard to describe the feeling of being robbed if you've never been robbed, but it leaves you feeling afraid of what happens next. Like you're questioning everything and everybody, right? It's very, very, like you're almost naked in that moment. It's a very, very vulnerable place to be in.
Like almost violating.
Yeah, it's very violating, right? That's a good word for it, violating. And but I learned again who I was in that moment. And that's what storytelling is. That's how you use storytelling in business, is to help other people understand who you are so that they can make the decision. Everyone, when someone's thinking about working with you or even buying your product, why should I work with Steven, or why should I buy an Apple product versus any and every other person or product out there? That why question ultimately boils down to why you, and storytelling is what helps answer that question, to help that person make the decision on their own. Not that you're trying to convince them, not that you're trying to manipulate them. They make the decision on their own that you're the right fit for them. And when they do that, they will know, like, and trust you. Some of my best clients, greatest clients, have been the clients I decided to just be vulnerable with. And vulnerability to me is a strength because it creates the bond and the connection that we need as human beings to survive. Hey, I'm scared of this. This is happening in my life, and I'm a bit scared that this is happening. And it opens the door to, hey, I can be there for you. I get that it's scary. I've kind of been through the same thing. Here's how I got through it. But you know what? I'm still just going to sit here with you and hold your hand.
Yeah.
That is human connection. That is, we as human beings cannot survive without human connection. We saw that happen through the pandemic where we were locked in houses, couldn't go out to see our friends that we connected with, family that we connect with. And unfortunately, during that time, some people did take their own life because they didn't have that human connection. It is a part of life. And to have that human connection, to have that depth, it requires vulnerability.
Yeah. Especially that, to make it meaningful.
Mhm.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's a good place to leave it.
Yeah. Stephen, thank you for having me on. It's I love these kind of conversations, man, and just going deep. And I thank you for allowing me to fulfill my purpose and just sitting here talking to you today.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. You can find the links to everything we talked about down in the show notes. If If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe wherever you're tuning in from so you don't miss out on what's coming next. And if you've been with us for a while, you might notice we've made a few changes around here. We're refining things as we go, switching up the music, updating the intro, the outro, and just evolving the format. We're doing it because we're committed to making every episode better. That's my promise to you guys. As we make those changes, we'd love to hear your feedback. So drop us an email, let us know what you think. It means the world to us. We'll catch you at the next episode.